Hi, this is Robert with Cruzbike, and today Jonathan and I are going to be unpacking and assembling a Silvio S30. Please take the time to review this video entirely before you begin, and if you need assistance, please see a local bike shop for assembly. Your Silvio has been pre-built and then disassembled and ships in the Sunlight bike case. You'll want to lay the bike case down with the latches facing the upward position and undo all the latches. The wheels will be at the top of the case if it is unlatched with the latches facing upward, and simply open the case. Begin by removing from the case any and all of the small items, including the seat and seat pad, the smaller items including tools, bags of spare parts and the chain, and also the wheels. The remainder of the frame has to be removed in one piece. It is very important that you grab everything all at one time, as shown in the video here, and lift it straight out of the case, making sure not to crease and crimp any of the cables. The frame, boom, chainstay, and handlebar assembly should be sitting aside and should sit up like this, ready for assembly. To assemble the bike, you will need an 8mm Allen, a 3, 4, and 5mm Allen, and an 8mm Allen or another Allen wrench to attach your crank arm. Assembly is best done with the drive wheel mobilized. Here we are using a rack storage stand to stand the wheel, and then we will build the bike right on top of the wheel. Place the frame and fork on the drive wheel as shown, making sure not to crimp any of the cables. Once that is done, we're going to very carefully rotate the boom and chainstay and set it over on the front end, and here's where we're going to check our cable routing. All of the cabling should route down the boom and around the front of the bike, to the front brake, the front derailleur, and also to the rear derailleur. Please note the cable routes down the boom and goes underneath the pivot clamp. Place the pivot clamp over the pivot clamp bolt on the fork and install the bolt and nut, making sure that the tab is facing the notch on the pivot clamp. We are not going to completely tighten it at this time. We are just putting it in to make sure that everything stays in place as shown. To install the derailleur, it helps to lock the cage out fully as shown. And then we are going to place the derailleur hanger on the inside of the chainstay as shown, and then we're going to slip the chainstay over the fork. The derailleur hanger should sit inside the notches as shown here. Once that is complete, we're going to install the wheel skewer and tighten it down. We don't need to fully tighten it at this time, but we're just going to tighten it down so it locks the derailleur in place. Then we are going to make sure all of our cable housings are lined up and inserted into the proper seats, and we're going to stretch the cable into the cable stops on the fork. The next step is to place the boom and slider assembly as marked in the proper position on the boom clamp and the pivot clamp. Make these two connection points snug, but do not over tighten them. Close the brake caliper, and now we're going to install the cranks. Make sure that the wave washer goes on the crank if it is included with your Silvio, and then we're going to install the non-drive crank arm with an 8mm Allen. Take note that your cranks might use a different Allen wrench for the installation. Tighten down your cranks as appropriate, making sure you have just enough pressure on the wave washer to prevent side-to-side movement of the cranks, and then that assembly is complete. The cables should exit your handlebars as shown with 2 on each side. They should be nice and clean coming out of the handlebars. We're going to now loosen the handlebar clamps and do a preliminary installation of the handlebars, making sure that all of our cables run cleanly down the length of the boom as shown. When tightening the handlebar clamps, it is important not to over-tighten them. Make sure that the top and bottom sections of the clamps have a small gap, and make sure that that gap is as even as possible on the top and on the bottom. In order to install the headrest, make sure that the scissor jack is pinched up in a complete V as shown. This will make sliding the headrest tubes into the frame much easier. Make sure that the rubber tubing is down over the ends of the headrest tube and then slide it into the frame past the scissor jacks. It may take a little bit of wiggling, but it should slide in. Using a number 3 Allen, snug down the scissor jack assembly. It does not need to be over tightened, but just snug enough to put pressure on the headrest. Once the headrest is complete, we are going to put the skewer in the rear wheel and slide the rear wheel into position. Now we're going to install the seat, which comes pre-installed with the bolts and some rubber spacers that provide a little bit of cushion for the wings. We're going to slide that on over the frame, Velcro it right down onto the top, and using our number 8 wrench and a number 3 Allen, we're going to tighten down the nuts. They do not need to be overly tight. All you want to do is tighten the nuts till there's just a little bit of pressure on the rubber washers. Once the seat is installed, install your seat pad. To install the chain, open the derailleur and lock the cage out if your bike is equipped with a cage lock derailleur. This will make chain installation much easier. We're going to take the chain and we're going to route it up and over the small ring, and we're going to wrap it around the cassette and then through the derailleur as shown in the video. Once it's through there, we'll have plenty of slack since the cage is locked out, and we will install our quick link. The easiest way to lock the quick link if you cannot pull it tight by hand is to release the pressure on the cage and very carefully rotate the chain around the small ring until the link is above on the drive side, and pull the crank, which should close the quick link. The final step in the building process is to line up the handlebars and get a good feel for those, and make sure all of the connections are secure. Make sure that you have secured the pivot clamp, the boom clamp. Make sure you use a number 4 Allen to secure the 2 ring clamps that go around the bottom bracket. Make sure that you have tightened the wheel skewers and closed the brake release levers. Secure the top portion of the cables to the slider with a zip tie, cut off the end, and that completes your Silvio S30 assembly. All that it needs now is pedals and a test ride.